I had lived in the same building for years, nestled in the heart of a bustling city. It was an old, gray apartment complex, with faded bricks and rusty fire escapes that wound their way up the sides like twisted vines. It wasn't much to look at, but it was home. Or at least, it used to be. The first sign that something was amiss came in the form of a creaking floorboard. It was late at night, and I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. I had always been a light sleeper, but this noise was different. It was a slow, deliberate creak, like someone was stepping on it with great care. My heart quickened, and I strained my ears to listen. The building was old, so I dismissed it as just another quirk of living in such a place. But the creaking continued, night after night. It always started at the same time, around 2:00 a.m. I tried to convince myself that it was just the building settling, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was something distinctly human about the rhythm of those creaks. One night, unable to take it anymore, I grabbed a flashlight and tiptoed down the hallway, following the sound. The noise led me to the apartment next door, apartment 303. It was a small unit, just like mine, but the curtains were always drawn, and I had never seen anyone coming or going from there. I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to hear anything beyond the creaking. And then, I heard a faint, whispering voice. It was too quiet to make out words, but the tone was urgent, almost frantic. My skin prickled with unease, and I hurried back to my own apartment, vowing to confront my neighbor the next day. The following morning, I knocked on apartment 303's door, but there was no answer. I could hear the creaking inside, but no one came to the door. I left a note, introducing myself and asking if everything was okay, slipping it under the door in hopes that my neighbor would respond. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing back. The creaking continued unabated, and the whispered voices grew louder and more desperate. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong in that apartment, but I didn't know what to do. I considered calling the police, but without concrete evidence of a crime, I felt helpless. One evening, as I lay in bed, listening to the familiar creaks and whispers, I realized that the voices were no longer confined to apartment 303. They were in my room, surrounding me. A cacophony of incomprehensible murmurs. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine as I pulled the covers tight around me. Then, the dreams began. Horrifying, vivid dreams that left me waking in a cold sweat. I dreamed of shadowy figures moving through the darkness, their faces hidden, their intentions malevolent. I dreamed of suffocating, of being trapped in a space so small that I could barely breathe. And worst of all, I dreamed of a presence, an unseen tenant, lurking just beyond my sight. My days became a blur of anxiety and sleeplessness. I withdrew from friends and family, consumed by the mystery of apartment 303. I couldn't escape the feeling that whatever was happening in that apartment was infecting my own life, seeping into my very soul. One night, driven to the brink of madness, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this any longer. I had to find out what was happening in apartment 303, no matter the cost. I slipped on a dark hoodie and grabbed a set of lockpicks I had purchased years ago, but had never used. With trembling hands, I made my way to the door of apartment 303 and began to work on the lock. The door swung open silently, revealing a room cloaked in darkness. The curtains were still drawn, and the only light came from the dim glow of the street lamp outside. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The creaking had stopped, and the apartment was eerily quiet. I moved cautiously through the dimly lit rooms, my flashlight cutting through the shadows. The place was in disarray, furniture overturned and papers scattered across the floor. It looked as though someone had ransacked the place, As I ventured further into the apartment, I noticed something strange. The walls were covered in intricate drawings, like a madman's scribblings. Symbols, words, and images were etched onto every available surface. They seemed to writhe and pulse in the dim light, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from them. My flashlight flickered, and panic surged through me. I needed to get out of there. I turned to leave, but then I heard the sound of someone whispering, coming from the bedroom. I approached the bedroom door with trepidation, my heart in my throat. The whispering grew louder, and I could finally make out the words. They were disjointed and nonsensical, a twisted chant that sent shivers down my spine. I pushed the bedroom door open, and what I saw inside will haunt me for the rest of my days. A figure, shrouded in darkness, stood in the center of the room. It was hunched over, its limbs contorted at unnatural angles. Its skin was pale and mottled, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent light. The room itself was a nightmarish tableau. The walls were covered in more of the disturbing drawings, and in the center of the floor lay a circle of candles, their flames dancing wildly. At the center of the circle was a grotesque, pulsating mass, like a tumor that had grown sentient. I stumbled backward, horror coursing through me. The figure in the room turned to face me, and a guttural, inhuman sound emanated from its throat. It moved toward me with an unsettling grace, its movements fluid and disjointed all at once. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the apartment as I fled. I burst out of apartment 303 and slammed the door shut behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I was back in my own apartment, gasping for breath. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something beyond my understanding, something dark and malevolent that defied explanation. The dreams, the whispers, the creaking, it was all connected to whatever had taken residence in apartment 303. Over the following days, I wrestled with what to do. I couldn't go to the police. They would never believe my story. And who would I even report? An unseen tenant? A malevolent force that defied the laws of nature? I began to research, digging through old books and scouring the internet for any clue that might shed light on what I had encountered. It was in the darkest corners of the web that I found a glimmer of hope, a reference to a forbidden ritual, one that could open a door to the other side. Desperation drove me to consider the unthinkable. If this ritual was the key to understanding what had happened in apartment 303, I had to try it. I gathered the necessary materials, candles, salt, and a dusty old book that contained the incantation. With trembling hands, I set up the ritual in my own apartment, preparing to open a gateway to the unknown. As I chanted the incantation, the room grew cold, and the air seemed to vibrate with energy. Shadows danced on the walls, and I felt a presence in the room, a malevolent force that was not of this world. I pressed on, determined to learn the truth. And then it happened. The room filled with a blinding light, and a figure emerged from the portal I had created. It was the same figure I had seen in apartment 303, but now it stood before me, fully visible. Its eyes bore into mine, and a voice, like 1,000 voices whispering in unison, filled the room. "You have trespassed where you do not belong," it hissed. "You have seen what should remain hidden." I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The figure drew closer, and I could feel its icy breath on my skin. "Your curiosity will be your undoing," it continued. "But perhaps I can offer you a choice. Serve me, and you may yet live." I didn't hesitate. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. I would do whatever it took to survive this encounter. The figure smiled, a grotesque, contorted grin. "Very well. You shall be my vessel, my conduit to this world. You will do my bidding, and in return, you will be spared." And so, I became the unwilling servant of the unseen tenant. I carried out its dark commands, spreading fear and chaos in its wake. I watched helplessly as it consumed the souls of those who crossed its path, their agonized screams echoing in my mind. I knew that I had unleashed a horror beyond comprehension, and I was powerless to stop it. The apartment building, once my home, had become a breeding ground for darkness, a place where the unseen tenant reigned supreme. And as I write this, I can hear the creaking, the whispering, growing louder with each passing night. The unseen tenant is hungry, and it will not rest until it has consumed everything in its path.